From the comfort of your screens, I welcome you to the Obsidian Current Agora, a place where ideas meet, experts discuss, and where projects are born. Our very first guest in this series of podcasts and interviews is Dr. Florian Krampe, who holds a PhD in Peace and Conflict Research from Uppsala University. He currently is the Director of Studies, Peace and Development at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and is an acting director of the Institute's Climate Change and Risks program. So his work spans academia and policy, advising UN agencies, regional organizations, and national governments on climate security and peace. Dr. Krampe, welcome to the Obsidian Current.
Thank you.
Without further ado, let us get started with our first question. In 1 minute, how do you think climate change can become a security risk rather than just an environmental one?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think to that question, it's a really important one because we see increasingly that climate change and environmental issues are not just that, they are happening in a certain context, and especially in contexts that are fragile and conflict affected, we see that climate change is compounding the hardship of already highly vulnerable populations. So in that sense, it becomes a new security issue.
Right, that's great. So if you'd like to move from theory to practice, what do you think is the most common misdiagnosis policymakers usually make, and how does that mislead interventions?
I think it's twofold. On the one hand is like assuming that the link is very simple, climate change causes conflict, or completely dismissing it. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's not an easy link, it's a more complex interaction. And in that regard, I think it's something where we have to deal with complexity and uncertainty, and that is not necessarily what you want as a policymaker when you're designing interventions. So I think that is maybe where some of the pitfalls lie.
Of course. If you're writing a global UN policy for prevention, what are the 3 ingredients that you think every climate-sensitive prevention plan must contain?
It needs to be conflict sensitive. It means acknowledging the context that it's in. It needs to be resonant with local needs, which is part of the conflict sensitivity, but also should aim at contributing more than just reducing the risk of conflict, because a lot of the interventions, especially if you think about climate adaptation projects, are a great opportunity to do more. It can be a development project, it is a peace-building project, and it is a climate adaptation project. It's not just one of those.
You're definitely right. What are the 2 top metrics that you would track to know prevention is actually climate sensitive and peace positive?
That's a good question. I think tracking prevention is really difficult because you never know if it would have happened. But I think that's why it's maybe most important to see more holistically what is going on in society beyond specific metrics. So it's expanding the view and looking pretty much at a more larger dynamics, be it the social contract, social cohesion elements, and some of those instances to see where they are and give you guidance on where things are going right or if things are going not so well. Yeah.
Building on this, I think it would be very interesting to dive into your previous research on climate and security. So I read that you co-authored the SIPRI's work on Somalia's climate-related security risks. So could you give us an overview of the study first, perhaps?
Yeah. The first study we wrote was in 2019, and which looked specifically at how the UN peace operation is impacted by climate change, and specifically its mandate. And it was quite interesting and quite surprising that we thought we would find something, but actually what we found was quite a significant impact across the board on the mandate of the mission, which is really was one of the first studies in that regard to show these types of impacts, from the humanitarian impacts that are more obvious to security sector reform issues to state building elements. So it was really interesting to see how severe the impact is on a peace operation.
And what do you think has changed in the past 6 years?
In Somalia?
Yes.
A lot has changed in Somalia in the last 6 years, and I think since we wrote the study, the UN mission has a climate security advisor. Climate change is much more on the agenda. Overall, it's part of the Somali government plans. So overall, it's much more that there's a recognition of climate security as an important factor that needs to be taken into account, but it's also actively being built into the peace-building processes and different policies from the UN to the national government to the local level and different agencies. I think that's a really important progress.
Now a final question to end our discussion. Let us imagine the following scenario. If you had 60 seconds with the United Nations Security Council, what would you ask them to do differently tomorrow on climate security files?
I think that's a really good question, and 60 seconds, yeah. It would be great for the UN Security Council to more consistently address the issue of climate security risks, climate-related security risks, climate peace and security challenges, and potentially give clear operational instructions to UN peace missions to respond to these risks. I think that would be the best possible way forward.
Of course. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Krampe, for your participation here today. It was very interesting, and we all had the chance to learn a lot from you in this Q&A interview. I hope we will have the chance to have you again on the Obsidian Current. And I thank you again, and I wish you a very nice day.
Thank you so much.